right, welcome everybody to part 2 of mixing with Slate Digital plugins, where we're taking a mix and using nothing but Slate Digital plugins with a few exceptions. Like I said in the last one, I'm using the UAD Plate Reverb because I do not own the Verb Suite yet. And there will be a few other exceptions, like, for example, I'm using a UAD Bass Amp because, I could have reamped this and use the same amp for all 3 tracks, but to me, I'm not going to count that against it. And the other plugin that I'm going to be using is a phase alignment plugin, because you can easily just do that in your DAW, but for the sake of time, I'm using a plugin just to be a little bit more speedy, because this is going to be somewhat of a long video. So last time we checked out the mix bus. Today we're going to be working on drums. So let's jump right into it. First we'll do the phase alignment, and then we'll start at the drum bus level and get to mixing. All right, let's check it out. Listen to the snare.
Finally alone, with a peace of mind that I've been searching for, and all I seem to hear is the sound of your laughter. And if you believe that I don't think about you, you should know it's hard to be so far without you. And when you hold my hand, it doesn't matter how far I may be. No, I'm home. I was there like a star. The present always lives in your heart, so let's enjoy our time. I'ma lean on you, you lean on me, so good when we're together. Now you should know I won't lose my way. The love always saves me. The love always saves me. Wherever I go, wherever I lay, now you should know I won't lose my way. Always save me. Always save And if you believe that I don't think about you, you should know it's hard to be so far without you. And when you hold my hand, it doesn't matter how far I may be. No, I'm home. I was there like a start. Gift of the present always lives in your heart. So let's enjoy our time. I'ma lean on you, you lean on me. So good when we're together. Save me, love always saves me. Ooh, oh, oh. Ooh, oh, oh. Ooh, oh, oh. We are. Ooh, oh, oh. Ooh, oh, oh. Here we are, well, I'm off again, going through this world, and traveling. I done seen some things before I've learned my lesson. I know your time seems to leave. The only way I know to give you what you need. So please hold on tight. You're on my mind. For you, I will. Now you should know I won't lose my way. Love always saves me. Love always saves me. Wherever I go, wherever I lay, now you should know I won't lose my way. Love always saves me. Love always saves me. Ooh, oh, oh. Ooh, oh, oh. Ooh, oh, oh. We are sitting in this room, finally alone, with a peace of mind that I've been searching for. And all I seem to hear is the sound of your laughter. And if you believe that I don't think about you, you should know it's hard to be so far without you. And when you hold my hand, it doesn't matter how far I may be. No, I'm home. I was there like a start. Gift of the present always lives in your heart. So let's enjoy our time. I'ma lean on you, you lean on me. So good when we're together. Hey, now you should know I won't lose my way. Love always saves me. Love always saves me. Wherever I go, wherever I lay, now you should know I won't lose my way. Love always saves me. Love
Okay, so let's check out what's going on. And let me just say, first off, to me, this is the best drum sound out of the three by far. And the imaging is starting to take place, and I just love it. Sorry, I get so excited about these Slate plugins. Anyway, so obviously I did the phase alignment. You could hear how that was adding a lot of weight to the kick and snare. Phasing is very important when it comes to multi-mic'd instruments. Okay, so let's check out what we did on the drum bus. So, virtual channel API, right? So I used an API emulation just to get some of that punchiness. Added a little bit of drive to it, and let's look at the EQ I did here. High passing at 20 just to get rid of that low end rumble. Getting rid of some muddiness at 350. Adding a little bit of a shelf at 7.5K. Then adding this custom series lift punchy, just a little bit in there just to give it some punch. Then dialing back the output a little bit. Then I went to FG red and I added some of the color from the drive. 4:1 ratio, slow attack, fast release because I want these drums to be very punchy and forward sounding. Getting about 2 to 3 dB of compression, and to tailor that in a little bit better, I used the high pass sidechain. And added a little bit of makeup gain just to bring the RMS level of that back up. And then what I did at the very end was I used the trimmer to level match this, and you could hear it was about, or you could see on the meter, it's about the same level, but it just sounds so much better. It sounds way better. Okay, so on every track I used the virtual tape machine, and I kind of added varying amounts of saturation. Not always saturation. Some of them went into the red just to contain to help that transient a little bit, make it sound a little less digital, make it sound a little more analog. But other than that, I just wanted to get a little bit more of the tape coloration. And then every track also has the Neve console on there. So I won't be explaining that on every single one. Okay, so let's check out the overheads first, actually. Okay, so all I did was high pass at about 50, and then cut out some muddiness around 400. Did that on both overheads. And I added a little bit of drive just to get some of that color. As far as the mono drum, I was getting some saturation on the tape, added some drive, quite a bit of drive from the console. High passed at 60, cut out some boxiness and muddiness at 400. You'll see that I did that on pretty much everything. And then I used the monster for the parallel compression. And this thing, it gets such a nice distortion and color. This is emulating an 1176 in all buttons mode. And this is one of my favorite sounds for drum room. As far as toms, I just kept everything the same as far as the tape and the drive. High passed at about 40, and then cut out some of that muddiness at 400. That's really it for the toms. Hi-hat, I'm adding some saturation. It's hitting the red when the snare hits because there is some snare bleed. Adding a lot of drive and adding some drive on the Neve EQ as well. And then as far as EQ, just high passing all the way up to 300. That's it for that. Snare, once again, hitting the red on the very hard hits. Other than that, just getting some of that color. Adding a little bit of drive on the channel. High passing at 60. Cutting out some 350. Then I'm using some compression, slow attack, fast release to keep that punchiness going. And then I have a 4:1 ratio, which is what I generally always use on drums. Getting about 2 to 3 dB of compression. Adding a little bit of makeup gain. And then to make up a little bit more of the signal, and as well as add some EQ, is I add some weight here, some body at 220, cut out a little bit more of that 360 just because I don't like that on drums. Getting a little bit of the crack of the snare at 7.2K, and getting some of that air at 12K, which is my favorite frequency on the FGN if you have watched my videos before. Okay, moving on, let's go to the kick in. Just adding more of that tape sound. High passing at 20, cutting some at 350, doing a boost at 3K for that beater sound, and then adding some air at 7.5K. Then same compression settings as the snare, and getting the same amount of gain reduction really. And I didn't add any makeup gain because I'm already getting some gain, some volume increase from the EQ feeding into that. And with SSL type EQs and SSL type compressors, which this is actually an SSL type compressor. It's a VCA compressor that's kind of like the compressor on your SSL channel strip, but it has a custom transformer and some other things that make it unique. But I like to feed the EQ into it, and it gives it this really nice punchiness, and you could really hear that in these drums. I mean, they're very, very punchy. So as far as the kick out, I pretty much did the same thing. I actually got rid of a little bit of the console drive, just because I want the low end to have some saturation but be a little bit cleaner. EQ is about the same, but instead of doing the high pass, I actually did a boost here at 60, and then trimmed some of that signal. And then one other thing I guess I should mention about the tape machines is on the low signals, like the kick drums, as well as the toms, I set the bias to low to affect the low end more, and it kind of actually tames that low end, which is pretty nice. And then finally, I did a reverb here with a long pre-delay. I did the Abbey Roads technique on this, so I filtered out the low end and the top end like I usually do. And this just helps give it a little bit of space. So once again, these Slate plugins are absolutely amazing. I'm really blown away by this. To me, the stock plugins and the Waves plugins didn't even compare to this at all. The Waves sounded great, don't get me wrong, and so did the stock plugins, and they both have their unique features that make them pretty cool. But for me, just the punchiness and the color of the drums with these plugins, these Slate plugins, it's just mind-blowing, and it really transformed the sound of these drums. So, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you've been enjoying this series. Thank you so very much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please give it a like. If you didn't, you can give it a dislike. That's okay. You're entitled to your opinion, as I always say. If you really liked it, please subscribe. I would greatly, greatly appreciate that. Thank you so very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Have a wonderful day.